At dawn the fields of Normandy looked calm, but they were hiding the scars of endless battles. Smoke drifted low over the hedgerows, and in the distance came the rumble of engines. Inside the Sherman tank named in the mood, Sergeant Lafayette Poole adjusted his headset and waited for the order to move. He was already a legend among his men, but today he had one more mission and one more chance to survive. The gunner beside him loaded another shell into the cannon while the driver whispered a prayer. Then the tank lurched forward through the mist and into the fire. Poole's legend began only weeks earlier when his crew cut through German lines with astonishing speed. In every engagement he seemed to appear where the enemy least expected him. His voice over the radio was calm and direct. His commands were sharp and his crew obeyed without hesitation. Together they destroyed convoys, half-tracks, and tanks in numbers no one could believe. Reports claimed that more than 200 enemy machines fell to his gun. Newspapers called him unstoppable. Soldiers whispered his name as a symbol of American strength. But behind the headlines was a man who barely slept and who carried the faces of his crew in his memory. The Sherman was not a perfect machine. Its armor could not match the Tiger or the Panther, and its cannon often failed to pierce German steel. Yet Poole learned how to fight by speed and surprise. He struck from the flanks, used cover, and relied on instinct more than doctrine. His crew trusted his eyes more than maps. They moved like hunters through the smoke and chaos. Every hit they scored added to his growing total, but every mile forward also deepened the uncertainty. Could the numbers really be true, or were they the creation of propaganda officers desperate for a hero? The battlefields of France turned into a test of endurance. Poole's tank was hit multiple times and repaired again and again. He lost comrades and replaced them with new faces who barely had time to learn his rhythm. Army archives later showed contradictions in the reports. Some victories were double-counted, others never confirmed. In the chaos of war, truth blurred with rumor. For Poole and his crew, survival meant more than statistics. They fought to stay alive and to bring each other home. By the time his third tank was destroyed and he was pulled wounded from the wreckage near the German border, his war was over. He had driven 3 Shermans, all named in the mood, across France and Belgium and destroyed hundreds of enemy vehicles according to official tallies. But even Poole never claimed the exact number. He said only that he did his job and that others paid a greater price. After the war, historians tried to trace his path using maps, logs, and after-action reports. Some found evidence supporting many of his kills, others found inflated figures. The truth was hidden beneath layers of confusion and the human desire to create legends. What remained clear was his determination and his courage under fire. Lafayette Poole was not a myth born from numbers, but a man shaped by relentless battle. His story reminds us that behind every statistic there is exhaustion, fear, and duty. Whether he destroyed 100 or 250 machines, the weight of his experience could never be measured by arithmetic alone. The legend of Lafayette Poole endures not because of a perfect count but because of what his journey revealed. A tanker's courage in the face of overwhelming odds. A crew bound by trust and fire. And a war where victory was written in smoke and steel rather than certainty. The diary was found in a rusted ammunition box buried near an old French hedgerow, its pages soaked with time and diesel. It belonged to Sergeant Lafayette Poole, the man many called the warrior with a tank. What was inside was not a story of glory, but a record of relentless movement, of burning engines, and of lives measured in the miles between gunfire. August 1944. The 3rd Armored Division is advancing through Normandy, pushing toward the Seine. Every field, every village, hides a potential ambush. Poole commands his M4A1 Sherman, nicknamed in the mood. His crew driver Wilbert Haas Richards, gunner Willis Aller, and loader Del Boggs know every sound of the tank, every vibration of its steel heart. They have survived so far not because of luck, but because of discipline and speed. The diary records it with dry precision: engaged 4 Mark IVs. Destroyed 3. 1 escaped into smoke. No emotion. No reflection. Just numbers. But behind those numbers are hours of chaos. Shells screaming overhead. The crack of armor-piercing rounds. The smell of oil and flesh mixed with cordite. The diary continues, tracing the route of the Third Army as they storm across France. Villagers cheer in the ruins of their homes. German prisoners stare in silence, their eyes hollow, their boots coated in mud. Poole's crew moves forward again, the engine growling like an animal that never rests. The further they drive, the more unbelievable the numbers become. Reports claim over 200 enemy vehicles destroyed in less than 80 days. The figures seem impossible, and yet the diary matches the unit logs. Every kill has a location, a time, and a witness. Still, even among his own comrades, there are doubts. Some officers whisper that the tallies were inflated, the chaos of war turning estimates into legends. Others swear they saw the wrecks themselves, burning on the roadside like a trail of iron graves. The diary offers no defense, only detail. It speaks of fuel shortages, broken tracks, lost friends. All are wounded. Replaced. Richard's tired but steady. It lists towns that no longer exist, crossroads where entire platoons vanished under artillery fire. For every enemy tank destroyed, there was an American one lost, its crew erased by a single strike. The steel beasts of the Third Army were not immortal, they were tools of a war that consumed men faster than factories could replace them. In September 1944, the diary stops abruptly near Aachen. The last line reads, "Engaged Tiger at close range. Fire in the engine. Evacuating." What happened next was reconstructed from after-action reports. Poole's tank was hit by an anti-tank shell. He was thrown from the turret, badly wounded. His war ended not in triumph, but in silence, lying in a German field with smoke curling into the gray sky. Years later, historians studying the campaign would reopen his records. They would map the movements of his unit, compare claims with German loss lists, and try to separate truth from myth. The numbers still defy logic. Some are confirmed, others disputed, but the path of the Third Army remains clear, an unbroken line of destruction stretching from Normandy to the Rhine. The diary of Lafayette Poole does not glorify war. It documents it as a mechanic would record an engine test, precise, methodical, stripped of emotion. Yet within those dry words lies something human, the endurance of men trapped inside machines of fire and steel, driven by orders they did not question, chasing an end they could not see. When the diary closes, it leaves one question behind: were these men heroes, or simply survivors of a system built to measure victory in numbers and wreckage? Perhaps both. In the end, the pages of that notebook are not about one man's legend. They are about the Third Army's relentless advance, the machines that carried them, and the cost hidden beneath the mathematics of war. The noise of engines mixed with the smell of burnt oil and wet earth. The crew of the Sherman tank named in the mood waited for the signal to move out. It was the summer of 1944, and the 3rd Armored Division was pushing deeper into occupied France. Sergeant Lafayette Poole, standing half out of the turret, scanned the horizon through the dust. He had done this so many times that the rhythm of battle had become part of his breathing. Yet each time felt different. Each time could be the last. The tank moved forward, treads grinding over broken fields. Through the intercom, the gunner Kenneth G. Crew called out targets while the loader, Willis Aller, slammed shells into the breach. Every few seconds, the main gun roared. German half-tracks burned in the distance. Machine gun bursts echoed from the hedgerows. Poole's voice came calm and sharp over the radio, directing fire, adjusting aim. To his men, he was both commander and machine, focused and unshaken. The numbers began to grow. 1 kill became 10. 10 became 50. By the end of August, reports claimed Poole's crew had destroyed more than 100 German vehicles. Each victory was marked in chalk on the turret, but behind every mark was smoke, screams, and wreckage scattered across roads that had once been quiet villages. The paperwork said confirmed, but confirmation often came from memory, not measurement. The chaos of combat made counting a dangerous illusion. In the after-action reports, officers praised Poole's precision. Yet behind those typed pages, clerks struggled to verify what was real. A destroyed truck might have been counted twice, a burning tank might have been abandoned before impact. Intelligence officers cross-checked field maps with aerial photos, trying to find proof that war rarely leaves intact. Still, Poole's reputation grew with every new claim. Newspapers at home called him America's greatest tank ace, a hero in steel. But inside the crew compartment, no one spoke of records. They spoke of survival. The smell of cordite and blood clung to the walls. The heat inside the Sherman reached unbearable levels, the metal floor vibrating with each shot fired. When the tank stopped, silence felt heavier than the noise. Crew would light a cigarette, hands trembling. Aller would wipe oil and sweat from his face. Poole would check the periscope, eyes never resting. Numbers meant nothing when one shell could erase them all. As the division moved toward Belgium, the fighting turned faster and more violent. German ambushes came from forests and towns reduced to rubble. On one of those days in September, the tank was hit. A single round from a German anti-tank gun tore through the hull. The explosion threw Poole clear of the turret. His men did not make it out. The legend of 258 kills ended in that instant, replaced by the reality of war's math: one tank, one life, one moment too late. After the war, historians tried to reconstruct what had happened. They compared Poole's reports with German archives, matching coordinates, dates, and destroyed vehicles. The truth was complex. Some kills were confirmed, others doubtful. The numbers changed with every new document discovered. Yet what remained constant was the fact that Poole and his crew fought with relentless skill and courage. The exact count did not matter anymore. What mattered was the endurance of men who lived and died inside a steel furnace, doing what they were ordered to do. War turns numbers into stories, and stories into legends. Lafayette Poole's tally became both a symbol of heroism and a reflection of how history struggles to measure chaos. Between fire and numbers, there is always the uncounted, the fear, the exhaustion, the silence after battle. In those spaces, the truth of the tanker's war still waits, hidden beneath the ashes and the ink of forgotten reports. The rain had not stopped for 2 days. Mud swallowed the tracks of every Sherman that dared to move forward. The men inside the steel beasts of the 3rd Armored Division sat in silence, listening to the hum of the engine and the dull echo of distant artillery. Sergeant Lafayette Poole, calm but unblinking, watched through the periscope as his platoon advanced toward the shattered village of Fromental. His tank, in the mood, was covered with scars of earlier battles, its armor bent and burned, its crew worn down to nerves and instinct. There was no glory in the sound of metal striking metal. The Sherman was never designed to duel the German Panzer head-on. Its armor was thin, its gun often inadequate. Yet the Americans compensated with speed, coordination, and overwhelming firepower. Poole understood this arithmetic better than anyone. He never hunted alone. His radio crackled with the voices of supporting tanks, infantry, and the air above. When the Germans moved, he calculated angles, terrain, and seconds, the difference between life and death. On that morning, his platoon moved through a corridor of broken trees. Somewhere beyond the fog, a German 88mm gun waited. The first explosion tore through the lead Sherman, a burst of fire and steel. The air filled with the sharp cries of men trying to get out of burning hatches. Poole did not hesitate. He ordered full throttle, swinging in the mood left into cover, while his gunner, Sergeant King, searched for the flash of the enemy gun. "Target, 75 yards, right ridge," King called out. The cannon roared, the recoil shaking every bone in their bodies. The first shell missed, striking dirt just below the ridge. The second found its mark. A German Panzer IV erupted into flame, its turret lifting off like a lid. For a moment, the crew allowed themselves a single breath of relief. Then another shot sliced through the air, hitting the Sherman's side armor. The tank shuddered. Smoke filled the interior. Poole's voice remained steady. "We are still moving. Reload. Fire again." There was no panic, only calculation. The arithmetic of armor warfare was merciless. Every hit meant seconds gained or lost, every reload a measure of survival. The Sherman was not superior, but it was adaptable. The men inside it were not invincible, but they learned faster than their enemies could recover. By noon, the small battlefield was silent. 5 German machines lay smoldering. 3 American tanks were destroyed. Poole's crew climbed out, exhausted, their faces blackened with soot and oil. The victory felt hollow. The burned wrecks around them were not numbers in a report, they were lives erased in seconds. The arithmetic of war did not care for courage or endurance. It demanded precision, patience, and sacrifice. As the sun broke through the clouds, Poole wrote a few lines in his pocket notebook. He did not write about glory or heroism. He wrote about distances, ammunition, and the time between each shot. He knew that someday, historians would count his kills and compare them with official reports. But those who fought beside him understood the truth: no man truly won a tank duel. There were only those who survived long enough to fight again. The Sherman and the Panzer were more than machines. They were symbols of two doctrines: speed versus strength, mass versus engineering perfection. On paper, the Panzer should have prevailed. In practice, it was crushed by the relentless rhythm of production, logistics, and sheer human determination. Poole's and the Mood rolled forward again, its tracks grinding over the ruins of another battlefield, carrying men who no longer believed in numbers but in the fragile mathematics of staying alive. The morning haze still clung to the fields of Normandy when Sergeant Lafayette Poole climbed into the turret of his Sherman tank. The air was thick with smoke and the metallic echo of artillery that never seemed to fade. The crew moved in silence, each man knowing that every mile forward was another step into chaos. Poole's hands were steady on the periscope, his voice calm as he directed his driver and gunner. Behind that calmness was exhaustion, the kind that settled deep in the bones after weeks of unbroken combat. The column pushed through the hedgerows, engines growling like beasts in a cage. Ahead, the enemy waited. Somewhere beyond the line of trees, a German anti-tank gun had already found its position. Poole's tank, named in the Mood, rolled first. The ground trembled under the tracks as they advanced toward the unseen threat. A flash tore through the mist. The round screamed past, slicing through the air, missing by inches. The gunner did not hesitate. A single high-explosive shell answered. The hedgerow erupted in flame and dirt. There was no celebration, only the brief silence that came after destruction. Poole's voice broke it. "Move on." The tank rumbled ahead, passing the smoldering wreckage. By noon, the unit had advanced 3 miles, burning through German lines that seemed endless. They left behind villages reduced to rubble, black smoke rising in thin columns that stretched across the horizon. Each encounter was a storm of fire and dust. The men inside the Sherman worked like parts of a machine, every command drilled into reflex. Loader, gunner, driver, commander, their movements synchronized by survival. Poole had an uncanny ability to sense ambushes before they happened. He trusted his instinct more than any map. When he ordered a sudden turn or a halt, his crew obeyed without question. Those instincts saved them more than once. By July, the numbers on the tank's hull told their own story: dozens of enemy vehicles destroyed, countless enemy soldiers scattered. But for Poole, there was no glory in counting. Each wreck they passed was a reminder of the next one waiting ahead. The heat, the smell of fuel and blood, the endless noise, they became the rhythm of his world. Sleep came in fragments. Letters from home remained unopened. The war had reduced everything to movement and reaction. During the drive toward the Seine, the resistance hardened. German panzer divisions fought with desperation. The terrain opened into wide fields, offering no cover. Poole's tank led the charge once again. Explosions dotted the landscape as shells struck near the convoy. One tank was hit, another caught fire. Still, in the mood advanced. Poole's commands were sharp, his tone never rising. The gun roared again and again, the recoil slamming through the turret like a heartbeat. When they reached the outskirts of Paris, the crew was unrecognizable, faces blackened by soot, uniforms torn and stiff with grime. They had crossed rivers under fire, fought through ambushes, and outpaced their own supply lines. Poole's legend was already growing among the ranks, but he never listened. He was focused only on the next bridge, the next village, the next horizon marked with smoke. Then came September. The war had shifted toward Germany's border. The fatigue was now heavier than the armor around them. On a narrow road near Belgium, as they pressed forward yet again, a German shell found its mark. The blast lifted in the mood off the ground. The world turned white, then black. When Poole opened his eyes, he was lying outside the wreckage, his leg shattered, his tank burning in the distance. The inferno he had driven through for months had finally consumed him. He would survive, but his war was over. His crew was gone, his tank reduced to twisted steel. The legend of his 258 victories would travel far, debated and doubted for generations. But in that moment, as the flames crackled and the smoke rose into the evening sky, there were no numbers, only silence, the kind that follows when the fire finally runs out of fuel. The numbers are staggering. 258 German machines destroyed by one man's tank. To many, Lafayette Poole was the embodiment of American armored warfare, a symbol of unstoppable firepower rolling across Europe. But behind that number lies a fog of confusion, propaganda, and the desperate need to inspire a nation at war. The story begins in the summer of 1944. The roads of Normandy were filled with mud, wreckage, and the acrid smell of diesel and burning steel. Poole, commanding his M4A1 Sherman named in the mood, was part of the 3rd Armored Division under General Maurice Rose. His reputation grew quickly. Reports claimed he destroyed tanks, half-tracks, and guns faster than any man in the field. Newspapers at home celebrated him as a hero, a name to rival even the fighter aces of the skies. But for the men who rode with him, it was not about glory. It was survival. His gunner, Willis Aller, remembered the chaos inside the tank. The deafening roar of the 75mm cannon, the constant vibration, the smell of cordite, and the cries over the intercom. Every engagement was seconds from disaster. German ambushes came from hedgerows, basements, and behind church walls. For every German tank destroyed, another waited unseen. Poole's crew fought not with numbers in mind, but with reflex and instinct. As his kill count rose, so did the scrutiny. Army records from the 3rd Armored Division began listing the numbers of destroyed vehicles, but few were independently confirmed. In the chaos of fast-moving warfare, units often double-counted the same wrecks. Some were already abandoned or destroyed by aircraft. The pace of the campaign made verification nearly impossible. Still, Poole's legend grew, shaped by journalists eager to report victories to an anxious public. After the war, military historians attempted to trace every engagement of Poole's tank. Using after-action reports, German records, and aerial reconnaissance, they tried to match claims with confirmed losses. The truth was complicated. While Poole's achievements were extraordinary, many of the credited kills could not be verified. Some historians suggested the real number was closer to 100, others argued it was even less. But what none could deny was his impact on morale. For the men of the 3rd Armored, Poole was more than statistics. He was the spearhead that broke through German defenses again and again. By September 1944, Poole's run came to an abrupt end near the German border. His Sherman was hit by an anti-tank gun. The explosion threw him clear, breaking his leg and ending his combat career. As he was carried away, the legend of 258 kills had already taken shape. It appeared in army bulletins, press releases, and even post-war histories. The number became myth before anyone could question it. Decades later, researchers revisited the story with access to German archives and declassified American records. They found inconsistencies in timing, overlapping claims, and missing confirmation reports. What emerged was not the story of a man who lied, but of a system that needed heroes. In the machinery of war, truth was often adjusted to fit the narrative. Poole himself never boasted of his score. He spoke of his crew, of the fear, the exhaustion, and the lives lost along the way. The myth of Lafayette Poole remains powerful because it captures the essence of how wars are remembered. Numbers become symbols, and symbols become legends. Whether he destroyed 258 or 58 enemy vehicles, his courage under fire was undeniable. The precision of the count may fade, but the story endures a reminder that behind every number in war, there is a man, a crew, and a moment when survival meant everything. The smell of oil and smoke still lingers in the fields of northern France, though decades have passed. It is here, among the hedgerows and broken villages, that the trail of Sergeant Lafayette Poole and his crew can still be traced. Their tank, an M4A1 Sherman named in the mood, carved a path through the German lines with a reputation that bordered on legend. But legends fade into myths, and myths demand proof. To understand what truly happened, one must follow the evidence map by map, wreck by wreck, line by line in the war diaries. The journey begins with the dusty archives of the 3rd Armored Division. Handwritten reports, faded with age, list coordinates and engagement logs. Some are exact. Others contradict one another. A morning entry might claim 5 enemy vehicles destroyed near Avranches, while an afternoon note revises that number to 3. Poole's name appears again and again, but so do the gaps days unaccounted for, missing pages, corrections scribbled by a clerk who never saw the battlefield. On the ground, modern researchers walk the same routes with digital maps and metal detectors. What they find challenges the wartime claims. Burned-out panzer hulls that never matched the positions in American reports. Impact craters where no German unit was ever stationed. In some places, villagers still remember the thunder of engines and the screams of incoming shells. They recall a tank that rolled through their streets so fast it seemed unstoppable. Yet in other towns, locals say no such battle ever reached them. The truth, it seems, lies somewhere between heroism and human error. Each discovery peels back another layer of wartime fog. The German records tell their own story, disorganized, chaotic, written under the same pressure of survival. Some list tank losses that align with Poole's route, others attribute those losses to airstrikes or artillery fire. When both sides claimed victory over the same ground, the math of war became a blurred equation of smoke and pride. The war diaries of Poole's own unit paint a vivid but imperfect picture. The language is technical yet human, mentions of broken tracks, ammunition shortages, and exhaustion. Between the lines, one senses the relentless pace of combat. His crew fought in 3 tanks, all named in the mood, each destroyed before being replaced. The route they took from Normandy to Belgium was not a straight line but a looping, violent path of destruction and retreat. In the end, the maps align into something more than a record of kills. They reveal the rhythm of war itself, confusion, speed, and calculation under fire. Whether the final number of German vehicles destroyed was 258 or far fewer, the scale of Poole's impact remains undeniable. He and his crew lived in a world where seconds meant survival, where every mile was bought with fire and blood. Reconstructing that route today is like assembling a shattered mirror. Each fragment an old report, a rusted turret, a soldier's scribbled note reflects a portion of the truth. Together they show the immense cost of glory and the fragile line between fact and legend. In the end, it is not just the number that matters, but the story of the men who drove through hell, leaving behind a trail of smoke, steel, and unanswered questions. The air inside the tank was thick with smoke and oil. The roar of the engine drowned out almost every sound except the hammering of the gun. Sergeant Lafayette Poole sat half-turned in the turret, his headset pressed tight, his voice cutting through static. Target, right flank, 100 yards. The gunner responded with a short nod, eyes fixed on the periscope. A second later, the whole Sherman shuddered. Another German machine went up in fire. But what the official reports never captured was the silence that followed. When the hatch opened, the heat of the battlefield mixed with the smell of burned metal and flesh. Poole's crew kept a running count, but none of them could say how many of those wrecks were truly theirs. In the chaos of the front, claims blurred like the smoke that rolled across the hedgerows. Weeks later, in a field camp near Chartres, Corporal Delaney began writing letters to his wife. He described Poole as fearless, almost reckless, driving straight into fire while shouting orders like a man possessed. Delaney's words never made it home. His letter was found decades later in an army archive, stained with fuel and dirt. It told a story that the numbers could not. Military reports praised Poole's unmatched efficiency in armored combat. Yet the witnesses who survived painted another picture. They spoke of exhaustion, of fear, of a man haunted by his own success. Some claimed Poole refused to rest, pushing his tank forward even when orders said to stop. Others said his crew begged for a pause that never came. In one after-action report, a lieutenant noted inconsistencies in the claimed kills. The figures were copied, adjusted, and retyped. No one wanted to question a hero when morale was hanging by a thread. The legend grew faster than the truth could catch up. Years after the war, a historian compared Poole's diary with German loss records. The numbers did not align. Some of the tanks Poole claimed destroyed were recorded as mechanical losses or abandoned by retreating crews. The myth had become larger than the man. Still, in those yellowed pages and forgotten letters, a different voice remains. It speaks not of glory, but of the weight of command, of men reduced to names in reports, of victories measured in burning steel. Beneath the legend, there were 4 men in a turret, breathing the same smoke, fighting the same fear, and writing a story that history almost chose to forget. The morning mist over northern France still carried the smell of burnt oil and iron. In the shattered fields near Saint-Lô, German officers moved between wrecked panzer hulls, counting, documenting, recording. Their orders were clear: every destroyed vehicle must be reported, every loss explained. Among these silent ruins, the German war diary of the 2nd Panzer Division began to tell a different story from the one echoed by Allied reports. According to the Wehrmacht records, many of the tanks claimed by American forces as destroyed in battle were, in truth, abandoned or immobilized by lack of fuel or mechanical failure. Some were sabotaged by their own crews to prevent capture. The reports, written in calm military language, reveal chaos and exhaustion behind the German lines but also show how inflated numbers could appear when the fog of war blurred reality. Lafayette Poole's tank platoon advanced fast and hit hard, cutting through enemy defenses with relentless precision. American dispatches described columns of burning German armor, claiming hundreds of victories. But in the German logs, the same battles appear more fragmented. Entire tank battalions were withdrawn before contact, or caught in artillery zones miles away from Poole's route. The maps do not align, and neither do the numbers. Inside a captured German command post, Allied intelligence officers later found stacks of typewritten pages, loss reports, situation maps, damage assessments. Some were stained with mud, others signed by commanders who would never return from the front. When compared with the American claims, inconsistencies emerged. One engagement listed 12 German tanks destroyed, the German side recorded 3 damaged and 1 burned beyond repair. The truth seemed to exist somewhere between both accounts, between heroism and miscalculation, between memory and military paperwork. The Wehrmacht reports do not diminish Poole's courage or skill. They expose something deeper: how in war, even statistics become weapons, forged by fear, pride, and the desperate need to make sense of chaos. In the end, the German documents do not accuse or absolve. They simply whisper from the archives, offering a quieter, colder perspective, one written not in glory, but in ink and silence. When the thunder of engines and the scream of shells finally faded, what remained of Lafayette Poole's world was silence and ruin. His tank, once a symbol of unstoppable force, lay crippled at the edge of a nameless French village. The crew that had followed him through fire and steel, Bowen, Cranford, Delaney, were no longer the invincible figures of wartime photographs. They were men reduced by exhaustion, their faces lined by the dust of too many miles and the fear that came with every dawn. The records would later show numbers: 258 enemy machines destroyed, dozens of engagements, hundreds of lives ended. But the documents did not speak of the moments between the victories. They did not mention how Bowen kept a folded photograph of his daughter in the turret, or how Delaney refused to remove his helmet even at night, convinced it had saved him once from a sniper's bullet. The official reports praised their precision, their aggression, their efficiency, but forgot the days when the tank refused to start, when rations ran out, and when they buried their friends in unmarked fields before rolling back into battle. When the war moved east and the front lines shifted, the men of Poole's crew were scattered. Some were reassigned, others wounded, one never found. Poole himself would be remembered as a legend, his name etched in history books and army records, but his crew faded into the margins. Their letters home were never published, their voices lost in the static of time. In the years that followed, only fragments remained: a burned-out Sherman photograph near the Rhine, a diary entry found in an archive, a citation that mentioned their courage without naming them. After the smoke cleared, the myth survived, but the men who made it real disappeared into history's shadow. What remained was not glory, but the quiet truth of soldiers who fought, endured, and were forgotten. In the chaos of war, numbers often became the only language of order. For the U.S. Army in 1944, every burned tank, every destroyed convoy, every shattered gun position was entered into reports that tried to give structure to destruction. Behind those figures were men like Lafayette Poole, whose claimed 258 kills turned into legend. But behind every number there was a question: how much of it was truth, and how much was the desperate need to believe in victory? The counting began with after-action reports written under fire. Commanders gathered what little they knew, often from radio fragments, scattered witnesses, and the haze of battle. A tank crew might claim 10 kills in a single day, yet confirmation required physical inspection of the wrecks, something that was rarely possible as the front lines moved forward. Reports were merged, rewritten, and simplified as they climbed through the chain of command until the chaos of the battlefield turned into clean arithmetic on paper. Archivists later uncovered how these numbers were often inflated by overlapping claims. A single German tank could be destroyed, abandoned, and then reported multiple times by different units. Intelligence officers knew this, but they also knew that high numbers fueled morale, headlines, and funding. Accuracy was important, but victory was urgent. Poole's record became a symbol of American dominance, repeated in newspapers and recruitment posters. Yet when the Third Army's archives were compared decades later, the confirmed kills were far fewer. The myth had already replaced the math. What mattered most to those who survived was not how many machines were destroyed, but how few men returned. In the end, the arithmetic of war was never just about numbers. It was a fragile attempt to measure chaos, to turn loss into logic, and to make sense of a battlefield that defied reason. The legend of Lafayette Poole has echoed for decades through books, documentaries, and military folklore. His name became synonymous with destruction on the Western Front, a man said to have destroyed 258 German vehicles in just 81 days of combat. But when historians opened the archives of the Third Army, the numbers began to crumble under scrutiny. The records were fragmented, reports missing, and unit logs filled with inconsistencies. The 32nd Armored Regiment's after-action reports told one story, while the field accounts of Poole's platoon told another. The supposed kill count, once repeated as gospel, began to look less like cold arithmetic and more like a product of confusion, chaos, and wartime exaggeration. Tank warfare in 1944 was not a precise science. In the smoke, mud, and chaos of battle, crews fired and moved without ever confirming what truly burned behind them. A vehicle hit was marked as destroyed, even if it later limped away. German armor was often hit by multiple units, and each claimed the same kill. Poole's Sherman could have struck dozens of targets, but how many were truly destroyed remains uncertain. When researchers compared aerial reconnaissance photos with the units' claimed paths, the math no longer added up. The supposed 258 kills likely included soft-skinned vehicles, half-tracks, and even abandoned equipment. Yet none of this erases Poole's skill, his courage, or his uncanny ability to lead under fire. He was wounded 3 times, saw his tank destroyed twice, and still pressed forward. His crew feared him, followed him, and survived alongside him longer than most. The legend may have been inflated, but the man behind it was real, a soldier forged in a war where survival itself was a form of victory. In the end, the question is not whether Lafayette Poole destroyed 258 machines. The real question is how legends like his are born in the smoke of battle, in the pages of wartime propaganda, and in the desperate need to find heroes amid the ruins.